Welcome everybody, Farm Sim Snowy here. So in this video we're going to take a look at how you can maximise your yield for your crops on your fields. We're going to do a couple of little tests as well thrown in, because a video like this wouldn't be the same without a couple of little tests, would it? I'm on Elm Creek, as you can see. We're up at the starting farm that you start off with in new farmer mode. All our tests are going to be on this field here. It has been harvested. It did have wheat in it. If we come up to the field, we've got our field info on. As you can see, had wheat in, it's harvested, 0% fertilised, says there's weeds growing in there already, it needs lime and it needs ploughing. So it's in its worst sort of state that we can imagine. So what I'm going to do is just run through a couple of little things I've changed in the settings just to keep you up to speed. I've turned seasonal growth off because I don't want that affecting when we can sort of plant and what we can plant and when we can harvest, etc. Just got it on 1 day per month to speed up the process. Turned snow off again, just don't want that interfering with anything. Crop destruction I've turned off just so we don't accidentally run over any of the crops and we're getting the maximum amount off of the field each time. Periodic ploughing I've left on because that is obviously going to affect our yield. Field stones I've turned off. They do not affect your yield. They will obviously damage your equipment, but I've turned that off because it just cuts out the inconvenience of having to pick them up every time we do the test on the field. Lime required is on because again obviously that will affect our yield, and weeds are on as well because of the same reason that will affect our yield. Just another thing to point out, if you are struggling with anything, I recommend coming in to look at the help menu because this has been changed. It's had a complete sort of overhaul since the update. It does explain things a little bit better. It's been broken down into different sort of sections. So we have got a proper whole improve and yield section now, broken down into different stages. Just for an example, here it says liming. It does say in there about it giving a 15% bonus on your yield if you obviously do lime, and things like fertilizing and removing weeds, etc. like that. Now obviously if you do have any of these things switched off, so if we go back up to here, if you have weeds, lime, ploughing, or all of them off, or just one or the other off like that, you will not have to worry about doing that stage. So for instance, if you've got weeds turned off, you will not have to deal with weeds. They will not appear in your field, and you will still get that 20% bonus automatically, even though you don't have to do anything. So just one thing to point out there, if you've got any of these switched off or all of them switched off, you won't have to worry about any of that. You will get that full bonus. But if you are playing with them switched on, which is obviously a bit more realistic, then you are going to need to do the necessary steps that we're going to cover a little bit later in the video. One thing I do want to point out, which is quite interesting, it doesn't really mention it in here, but if you check out the Farming Simulator Academy, which is on the Farming Simulator website, I'll put a link in the description. There is a section on there as well about improving yield, and under removing weeds it says about using herbicide, and it says if you use herbicide you do get a 15% penalty because basically you're putting a chemical on your crops. So that possibly is going to be something we're going to test towards the end of the video, but I'm going to try and keep it simple because I know it's a bit overwhelming, especially if you're new to the game. And I know how that feels like when I first started playing FS19. I didn't know where to start. So I'm going to keep it sort of simple, break it down. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to leave this field as it is in its worst state, worst case scenario it's going to be. All I'm going to do literally is I've got a cultivator to run over the field just to give us our seed bed, and then I've got a seeder ready over there. I'm going to be using canola on every single test because we are going to do the little bee test as well, because bees are meant to improve your yield as well for canola, sunflowers and potatoes. So obviously that's why I've chose canola. This is just a shallow cultivator. I'll just show you in the shop what we've got. So under cultivators, it is just this fella here, the Rossel Mash. As you can see, top right, it says shallow cultivators are used for shallow cultivation or seedbed creation of fields. Now you could go over this straight away with a direct drill, but I'm not. Just to sort of keep it simple, I'm going to use a cultivator and then seed. I'll get that done. I'll bring you back in when we've sort of finished that stage, and then we'll go from there. So I'll see you in a bit, guys. Right, the canola is ready to harvest. We're now in April. That was 8 months I skipped forward for it to be ready to harvest. We've got our harvester ready to go. Probably a bit overkill for a field this size, but it will get the job done quicker. As you can see, we've got huge weeds in this field, and if we go into the field now, that yield bonus percentage has dropped right down to 0, which is what I was expecting it to, because we did nothing with these weeds. So this field, like I said earlier, is in its worst possible state. So we are going to harvest it. We'll see how much we get off of the field at the end. I'll take a note of it and we'll kind of go from there. So I'll crack on. I'll bring you back in when we're almost finished, and we'll see how much we make off of it. So we're almost done. And that should be it. Turn that off. Fully harvested. 2005 litres of canola off of that field. So, is that any good? Well, obviously we know we can get that better, which we are going to. So I'm going to reset this now right back to where we were at the start of the video. I'm going to get all of the necessary equipment that you're going to need for each stage to improve your yield, to get it up to 100%. I'll get them all out and I'll line them up in that field next door. We'll go through what they are and kind of what they do, and we'll sort of go through that process as we go. So I'll see you a little bit later. Right, I'm back. I have everything set up. It's been reset. The field is back to how it was at the beginning of the video. As you can see, needs lime, needs ploughing. Now I've got, well, a bit of a fent fest going on here. But I've got all the required pieces of equipment. I'm going to go through them with you. I'll show you where you can find them in the store if you're not familiar with some of them. Now, some of these steps I will point out, you don't have to do them in the exact order I'm doing them, because for example, some people would come up to this field, they'd probably put lime down straight away, a coat of fertiliser, then do their mulching and ploughing, etc. like that. So some of the things, it's up to you how you do them. You might find more convenient ways to do them than what I'm doing. And another example is I'm using that seeder again. That is not a seed and fertilise seeder, that will only do seeds. But again, if you use one that fertilises as well, that will give obviously your first or maybe even second stage of fertiliser if you've done the sort of fertilising like I've just said. But I'm going to try not to brainwash you too much. The only step that you will have to copy exactly how I'm doing is after seeding or planting, you have to roll. If you want your 2.5% bonus, then you have to use a roller after seeding and planting. So that is the only step that I recommend copying, exactly the same as that. Now, again, for some of you guys, if you're starting off and playing sort of quite realistic, trying to build your farm up, you might not, ouch, I just hit my elbow, you might not be able to afford some of this equipment. So my recommendation would be try and do as much as you can, even if you're just leasing the equipment. Try and do the ones that give you the highest yield bonus. So for instance, your ploughing, your fertilising, they're going to give you the highest yields. Your weeding, if you can, I think the fertilising, each stage of fertiliser is 22.5%, so that will give you 45% bonus if you do it twice. Your weeding's 20%, I think your ploughing's 15%, and your liming's 15%. So just try and do, you know, what you can afford, because some of this equipment is a little bit pricey. I'm using all of the big stuff just because it's going to make the test a little bit quicker for me. But first of all, we've got this is a mulcher. So basically, if we look round at our field, we've got stubble from the wheat where it was harvested. So to get a 2.5% bonus, you're going to need to mulch that stubble, and you need to use a mulcher. Again, I've got the biggest one in game. I'm just using all base game equipment. By the time you're watching this, there could be decent mods out where you can use them. So we'll go into the store, under tools and mulchers. This is where you'll find all your mulchers, obviously the smaller ones at the start, and then I'm using this big guy at the end, the Concealer TJP 610. I do quite like this Dalbo maxi cut. It's more of kind of like a roller looking. It's not quite as wide as the one we've got, but it's only 0.2 meters less. So that guy's pretty cool. I do recommend that. I've used that before. But we've got that fella. So mulching first, then we're going to subsoil. So this will be your ploughing state. That will do our ploughing required part of the test. Now obviously you can use a plough. I'm not a big fan of ploughs. I prefer subsoilers, and again I've gone for the biggest one. One thing I will point out, if we go into here into our help menu, if we go down to the ploughing section, up the top there, it does say obviously you will need to plough every time you harvest root crops. So things like potato, corn, sugar beet and sugar cane, I believe as well. So every time you harvest one of those crops, you will have to plough. But I think once you've ploughed your field once, providing you don't use any of those crops, you don't have to do it for a certain amount of time. Now in FS19 it was every 3 harvests, but I think it's different in FS22. I'm not 100% sure what it is because I haven't actually got that far in any of my gameplays yet. But it also says a little bit further down that same paragraph there, it says using a plough will prevent weeds from growing and increase the yield for the next harvest. So that's saying if you plough that field, you shouldn't get any weeds. Skip down to the bottom there, it says you can also use spaders or subsoilers. They also will prevent weeds from growing and increase the yield for the next harvest. That is not strictly true, because using a subsoiler does still provide weeds for you. Weeds will still appear, and it does actually say that in the Farming Simulator Academy. So again, I recommend checking that out. Like I say, I will put a link in the description below. But spaders on the Farming Simulator Academy does say they will prevent weeds. So if you use a plough or a spader, you shouldn't get any weeds. I haven't actually tested them because, like I say, I'm not a big fan of ploughs. Just use subsoilers, but you do still get weeds with subsoilers. So kind of the Farming Simulator Academy does contradict some of this a little bit. This is quite helpful, this menu. I do recommend just having a little check. It will give you some advice and steps on different subjects, but the Farming Simulator Academy seems to me the best way to go if you want to sort of check up on anything, because everything so far in there tallies up with what's happening in the game, including the yield bonuses, because some of these are slightly wrong as well in here. But there we go. Right, that's rant over. Next up, we're going to lime the field. So we've got a fertiliser. Oh, I didn't show you that. Subsoilers, sorry. So under tools again, subsoilers. These are all the subsoilers, various sizes. Again, I've gone for this guy because it is the biggest one that we can do, like so. After that, we're going to lime the field. So I've got a fertiliser spreader there, which will do lime and fertiliser. Again, under tools, fertiliser spreaders. We went for this guy. As you can see, you've got the solid fertiliser and lime symbol down the bottom. If you get anything like this guy here, that only does solid fertiliser, won't do lime. But there is obviously some mods out that will do both. Next up, we're going to use this seeder again. So this is obviously under seeders. And again, I've gone for a fairly big one. And like I said, it doesn't fertilise, it's just purely a seeder. And we're going for that. That's 12 metres wide. It doesn't require a lot of horsepower, that as well. So that's pretty cool as an option. So then obviously we're going to put our canola in the ground after that. Then this is the most important step to follow after seeding and planting, is to roll. Cannot emphasize that enough. If you want that bonus, you have to roll after seeding and planting. So this is our roller. So again, this you'll find under tools and under rollers. I've just gone for this Power Roll 1230 HD because the other one is absolutely huge at 24.3 meters. You need to be a little bit careful though, because in grassland care there is some rollers that are strictly for grass work. So these guys, like so. So that is our roller. We're going to do that. Then after we've rolled, we're going to put our first stage of fertiliser down, and that is obviously the fertiliser spreader I've just showed you, which is this first one, the Amazon. It's got a nice spread width up to 42 meters, that one. And then after that stage, we're going to skip forward a month, because obviously I've got it on 1 day per month, and we should have some growth of canola, and we should have some baby weeds. And then we're going to tackle the weeds with this, which is our weeder. So again, in tools, under weeders. Now all of these will get rid of small weeds, but this one I'm using here, I'm only using this one again because it's fairly big and I quite like this one. This will pull out small and medium weeds, whereas all the others will just do small weeds. So depending on what sort of growth state your weeds are in, you might be able to catch them with this guy if they've gone a little bit higher than what you wanted. We're going to tackle them with that, and then after that we're going to put our second stage of fertilizer on, and that will be it. That should be 100% yield bonus, and we won't need to do anything then until harvest time. So that is it. What I'll do is I'm going to do little clips showing you what I'm doing of each piece of equipment, only sort of like 5-10 seconds long, just so you can see that I am actually doing it. And then I will run through the process that you need to do again. I'll put the sort of order that you need to be doing it, and like I say, you probably will find it, well, I don't want to do that subsoil at that point, I'd rather put a bit of lime down first and do that. That's absolutely fine, that's your choice. And like I say, there is probably quicker ways to do it than what I'm doing it, but I'm just trying to break it down into simpler steps so you guys can sort of follow along and get it into your heads, because like I said earlier, it is a little bit daunting, some of it. But definitely roll after seeding and planting. So I'm going to crack on with the mulching, and I'll probably see you at the end when we've put our first stage of fertiliser on there, and we'll check what sort of bonus we've got. So I'll crack on with it. And we are done, well, for now, until the next stage. But that is everything I've done. You've just seen little clips. If we run in here now, as you can see, field info, got canola growing in there. We've got plus 78% yield bonus. Fertilised 50%, because obviously we've put the first stage on, and it does say weed growing, and it's telling us that we could use a weeder for that. Now basically what's happened there is it is like it did before, giving us our plus 20% because it's assuming we're going to deal with the weeds. Obviously if we didn't, that would drop down, because we are 22% short of having 100%. That 22%, well in fact it is actually 22.5%, is going to be coming from our second stage of fertilizer. So that all makes sense. So that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is skip forward to the next month, and we should have some canola sprouted through and some weeds, and we'll deal with the weeds. I have saved the game, by the way, at this point, because I thought it would be easier to cut out having to do all the process that we've just done, because if I load back up at this point, we've got everything done and canola in the ground, and then we can add the beehive up the end there and skip forward, and then we'll check that test. Possibly we'll test herbicide as well, because another thing I have heard is, I think at this stage now, if you were to spray herbicide on this field, you shouldn't get any weeds pop up next month like what we are going to get now. But whether again that spraying herbicide is going to give us a deficit, I don't know. So possibly we could test that as well. But what I'm going to do is skip through to August and come back in. We'll deal with the weeds, we'll put a second stage of fertilizer on there, and then we're good to go until we're ready to harvest. So I'll see you next month. Right, we skipped forward a month then. Got our weeder ready to go there. As you can see, we have got canola and weeds. That yield bonus percentage has dropped down from 78 to 63 because obviously we have got weeds here. What is quite interesting though is it now says weed and in brackets medium, and it's telling us to use a hoe. So even though before we skipped forward to this month there was no visible weeds, if we'd have tackled them with a weeder, let's go back into our weeders. So like I say, all the other guys will do small weeds, but this one we've got is a hoe, and that will pull out small and medium, which is why we can use this fella now. So any of these guys, if we'd have, I probably will do this as well actually, load back in and test this. If we were to run over our field, even though we couldn't visibly see any weeds with any of these guys, possibly even with this fella actually, wouldn't it? So yeah, that would work, small and medium. So basically this is kind of like our last opportunity to get rid of these weeds with one of those without them getting too tall and having to use herbicide. So that's something you need to be careful of. I mean, in our menu now we do have, if you look to the far right, various stages of weed growth. So you possibly could get away with maybe another month or two and still be able to use that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to test that. That's something for you guys. You can try and find out for yourselves. But it could be a little bit risky, because if you let them go too high, you're going to have to use your herbicide and then you're going to get your penalty. So it's a little bit odd. Anyway, I'm going to deal with these weeds and then we'll put a second stage of fertilizer down, and then that is basically it. It will be skipping forward then until we're ready to harvest. But I will bring you back in once we've finished second stage of fertilizer, and we'll check the yield bonus now. That should sit at 100% after doing all this. So I'll see you again in a bit. Right, that is the whole process done. With a bit of luck, fingers crossed, we should have a 100% yield bonus. Like so. Happy days. And it's been fully fertilised. So that is it now until harvest time. So we don't need to do anything else to this field. We are at our maximum. So I'm going to skip forward now until it's time to harvest. I'll probably bring you back in at the stage coming down this side like I did last time, and we'll see where we're at. But in theory, with us having 100% yield bonus, we had 2005 litres last time. That technically should be doubled, so we should be looking at around 4010 litres of canola, but we shall see. So I will see you again in a few months' time when we're sort of finishing off the harvest. So we're almost finished harvesting, and as you can see down the bottom, we have absolutely smashed that 2005 litres. Are we going to get 4010? Oh. Wow. Would you believe it? We're 1 litre short. But there you go. That is a prime example of how you can maximise or improve your yield by doing those steps. Obviously, as you can see, it's kind of reset this field now. But yeah, that's pretty good. 4009 litres. I'm going to take another note of that. Now, if you want, guys, I'm going to do a couple more tests, but if that's the only reason why you come here to see what sort of order and what stages you need to be doing to get that 100%, then by all means you can finish watching the video. I hope you do stay though, because I'm going to do a couple of little extra tests. What I will do now is I'm going to reset to that stage we were at where we finished all the rolling and fertilizer, etc. like that. I'm going to place a beehive down, and we should technically get some sort of increase on the yield bonus. I won't go through all sort of any other processes. I'll just quickly get to that point. I'll show you me putting the beehive down, and then I'll skip through until we're coming to the end of harvesting again. I possibly will jump out the harvester before we finish and just run into the crops so you can see what the yield bonus says, and then we'll take a note of that, and then I may do a couple of little tests just on this herbicide. Probably one on spraying the herbicide down before we actually get any growth, and then I am then going to wait for the weeds to grow quite tall and tackle them with herbicide. But again, I'll tell you what I'm doing. So I'm going to reset. I'll see you back here, and we'll put a beehive down. Right, so we've reset now back to this point. Before we put the beehive down, I just want to, out of interest, got our weeder. So as you can see, it says weed and in brackets growing, and it's telling us to use a weeder. I just want to see, even though there's no visible weeds there, and even if we go into this menu and go to here, we might have to turn off a few things, turn off mulched and fertilized. Nothing, because this is our weed menu. It's not showing anything for that. So even though there's no visible weeds on the ground or on the map, this in theory should tackle the weeds at this early stage. So we'll just go that far. So as you can see down the bottom, we've got weed growing, weeder. If we move into this area, that has disappeared. So that's pretty cool. Back into there, weed growing, over to here. Come on, there we go. Just need a little bit of updating. So that's pretty cool. We know we can use that now at this stage. And also this is the stage where you could use herbicide, but I am going to test that because I want to know if we do get a penalty on that, or is it only a penalty if the weeds are high. I'm not sure. What I'll do, I might as well finish this field with the weeder, but before we do that, let's place down our beehive. I think we'll put it up this end. So let's go into animals, across to bees. I'm going to choose the biggest one, which is this beehive, 35 hives, and we're going to face it towards our field. I want to get as close as I can, but without damaging or ruining the field. Probably something like that, I would imagine, like so. It did move slightly then. I think it's raised that bit of ground, but it hasn't ruined the field. It better not have ruined the field, because if it has, we might have to... No, the edge is still there, it's just raised it slightly. That's fine, that shouldn't affect us. The bees are coming out. I suppose we better put a, just to be safe, honey pallet location. I'm going to pop that over there. Can be out of the way then. So I will get this finished weeding, and I'll bring you back in towards the end when we're harvesting. We'll check the yield bonus on the field, and I'll let you know as well whether any weeds pop up between now and harvest time. Technically they shouldn't, but we'll see whether they do or not. So I'm just on the last strip. Interestingly enough though, if we come into the field, the yield bonus has not gone up. So I'm hoping that I've done something right with the bees. We'll soon find out. As long as we can beat 4,009 litres, I'll be happy, because that does prove that the bees do increase your yield on those crops. I think we are going to do it by the look of it. It's not going to be a huge amount. But it is an increase. So there you go, 4,096. So it has increased it a little bit. So I'm guessing maybe if you put a couple more beehives down, you would increase that by even more. So that is another test done and dusted. We didn't get any weeds come up again after weeding at that early stage, but the only thing I would say is it is quite awkward to see where you've actually been doing it at such an early stage like that, because you don't get any texture change, colour change on the ground. So you kind of just have to make sure you follow your tyre tracks and keep yourself overlapped from the last one, if that makes sense. But we didn't get any weeds appear after that, so that was pretty good. So 4,096, I'm going to write that down as well. What I'm going to do now is totally reset to the field again, and we're not going to bother with the beehive. We know that does work, it does have some effect, not a huge effect, but it does have some. I'm going to spray down some herbicide and then move on to the next day and do the whole weeding. Well, actually I shouldn't have to weed technically, but I will put the second stage of fertiliser down on the next month, I should say, not day, and then I'll bring you back in and we'll check the total amount of that as well. I'll bring you back in though right as we're coming sort of to the end of harvest, because I don't expect you to sit through all of this. So this one's going to be testing to see if it makes a difference spraying down that herbicide at such an early stage. Apparently you shouldn't get any weeds, but do we get a penalty for using herbicide? So I'll do all that and I'll see you towards the end when we're harvesting again and see what the results are. Right, so let's just stop there a second. Turn that off so you can hear me. So this is after spraying herbicide down straight after sort of doing the first stage of fertiliser. As you can see, we are at 100%, so we have no deficit or penalty. So we're saying 100%, so I'm expecting to get 4,009 hopefully litres off of this field. We didn't get any weeds at all come up from putting that herbicide down at such an early stage, so that's pretty cool. But obviously one thing to bear in mind, herbicide and the spraying equipment can be a little bit expensive, so maybe you are better off ripping the weeds out at an early stage with a weeder. So what are we going to get? There we go. Absolutely on the money. 4,009 litres again. Pretty cool. So yeah, we now know that we can spray herbicide down at a very early stage before any growth appears, and we can also use a weeder to get rid of the weeds as well, which is probably your cheapest option to do. So that's another test complete. I'm going to do one more test, and that is to repeat the process. I'm going to let the weeds grow quite tall, and I'm going to use some herbicide. I'll probably show you a short clip of me spraying, and then I'll bring you back in sort of around about what we've just done as we're coming to the end of the harvest, and see what sort of penalty we get if we get one, and what we get off the field. So I'll see you again, guys, and that will be the last test. I'm not doing any more, because again, you probably could sort of test, you could probably go through the stages of the growth of the weeds, all the different growth stages, and use herbicide and test that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm literally going to do this one here, and then sort of when the weeds are grown quite tall, try and catch them at their tallest whilst we've still got the opportunity. So I'll see you in a bit, guys. Right, so I thought I'd bring you back in at this stage. You saw a clip of me using herbicide on here, and you can just about see there's some dead weeds in our field. But did we get a penalty for it? Let's find out. The answer is yes. So if you look down to the bottom right, it says yield bonus plus 85%. So we are minus 15% because we used herbicide. You can see the dead weeds already in here. So using herbicide at this sort of late stage, I don't know if you noticed, but I went right up to the month before harvest, but it did come up with large weeds. I think a couple of months that I skipped into it come up with large weeds straight away. So probably would still get the 15% penalty for that as well, but I went right up to sort of the last minute, the month before harvest. And yeah, we have got a 15% penalty for it. And if we go into this menu, you can see this has gone a brown sort of colour now, because top right where it says weeds there, this was sort of a green colour, and it was sort of gradually getting darker. Once we killed them off, it went completely brown to show that they are dead, or withered, I suppose, that same sort of colour. So I'm going to harvest this anyway. We obviously know it's not going to be as much as what we would have got if it was 100%, but I will harvest it, and I'll bring you back in towards the end, see how much we did get for it. And that will be it for the video. So I hope everyone stayed with me this far in. I'll see you in a bit. Right, so we're almost there, and that is it. 3,708 litres. So we are a bit shy of what we should have, but that is understandable. We got our 15% penalty. That is it though, that is the tests over. Hopefully someone's found this useful and you stuck with me this far. I know it can be a little bit sort of confusing and trying to get your head around it, which is why I've tried to sort of break it down and simplify it. But basically, just to recap, if you want your 100% yield regardless of bees at the minute, and like I say, you can do most of it in sort of whatever order you want, but you must roll after seeding or planting. So basically what you need to be doing is mulching, ploughing or subsoiling, or even using a spader, liming your fields, obviously only if required, and same with ploughing. Only plough if required, only lime if required. If you don't need to do that on any of your fields, just carry on with the other ones. You pretty much are going to need to mulch every harvest, because as you can see with this canola, we've got stubble there. So you need to mulch, plough if required, lime if required, seed or plant, then roll straight after that, fertilise, do your weeding, and then second stage of fertiliser as well. I'm going to try and put some of these pictures up onto the screens as well, just so you've got a better idea, but I highly recommend checking out the Farming Simulator Academy, like I've said a few times in the video, because that does explain it a lot more than the help menu that's in game, in my eyes, and that's kind of broke down into different sections as well. So if you are having a bit of difficulty in another area of the game, there's even separate things on there like ploughing and cultivating that will tell you all about the ploughs and how ploughs don't produce weeds if you use one of them and all sorts like that. So it is very, very handy. But that is it for me. Hope I haven't brainwashed anyone and left you feeling even more confused. I tried my best, but I hope someone has found it useful. If you have, please give us a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos of mine. I've been Farm Sim Snowy. Stay frosty.